Let's log in now to the Billbay InvoiceNow-Ready Solution. So the moment you log in, you are actually going to be taken to the accounting dashboard, right? And what you can see here is, first of all, you have your AR section, which is really talking about customer invoices or your sales invoices. Similarly, if you go to vendors, this is the accounts payable section. So you have your AP invoices, also known as bills. So if you go to the accounting menu, you can see all the standard accounting features like journal entries, tax adjustment, locking of fiscal periods. If you go to the reporting menu, you can see your standard reports such as balance sheet, profit and loss, age partner balance, tax report. There is also a GST invoice submission log and a reconciliation report between GST and FI. Okay. One of the key things to note is basically when you get access to your solution, it is pre-configured with InvoiceNow activated. So as you can see here, the PEPAL ID is already plugged in for you. And basically the GST invoice now is activated, as well as the PEPAL e-delivery, which is the B2B invoice now, is also activated. At any time, you can use the action buttons here to disable yourself from InvoiceNow, or you can re-enable it. So once you submit the request, it is going to be processed. Let us now look at our first use case, which is basically what we want to do is to send a PEPAL sales invoice to a company that is registered on the InvoiceNow network. So let's choose Billbay Private Limited, and let's invoice them some apples, 100 apples for $2 at a standard rate of 9%. So the flow here is essentially going to be from the sender to the customer, and then sequentially to IRAS for GST reporting. Let's go to customers, invoices. We click on create. The first thing you want to do is select the customer, in this case, Billbay. All right. And if you look at the customer master data of Billbay, the key thing is you can see certain key fields are captured, which is mandatory for GST invoice now, right? UEN, the GST registration number, and more importantly, the PEPAL ID. So this is what essentially makes it a PEPAL flow. And you need to have the PEPAL active flag to be checked. So which is all done here, which means this invoice is going to be routed through to PEPAL and eventually then to IRAS. So let's go ahead and add our line items. We said apples, and we said 100 at $2, right? So once that is done, everything looks good. You can leave most of the fields empty because the system is going to take its defaults, and then you can click on validate. So when you click validate, basically an invoice number is generated, and you can see some essential information like the invoice date and due date all gets assigned based on certain defaults. Okay. The tax status, as you can see, is blank. So what happens is basically now this invoice is already queued for submission. So if you go to the e-delivery tab, you can see that the system is queuing it for a PEPAL transaction. Eventually, all the data fields here will be populated automatically while the transaction is happening. Let's now go to our second use case, okay? In this case, we want to create a non-PEPAL sales invoice. So what does that mean? It really means that this is just a company, which is maybe, let's assume it is GST registered, but it is not yet registered on the InvoiceNow network. Let's do the same use case. We are going to invoice them some apples, 100 pieces at $2 at the standard rate of 9%. So let's go customer invoices, create, and then basically let us now choose a company. And we have already pre-created a company called Just a Company. So if you look at that company, you can see that this company has a UEN and a GST registration number, but the PEPAL ID is blank. Essentially, does not have a PEPAL ID, which means it is not on the InvoiceNow network. So when you send this invoice for e-delivery, it will directly go to IRAS. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing. We will invoice them some apples, okay, for let's say 100 pieces for $2, and we're good to go. So let's go ahead and validate. Okay, same thing happens. This is now being queued for delivery, and the tax status is blank. Okay, now what we want to do is really let's go back to our invoices and look at the first case, okay, to see what is the status of the e-delivery. Okay, so like I said, the system will automatically update the status. So you can see in this case, the PEPAL flow is completed. And if you were to click on the end, immediately after that, remember it's a sequential delivery. It will now report the same invoice to IRAS for GST reporting. Okay, let's go ahead and click on the InvoiceNow Sync button. And you can already see that the tax status has changed to submitted. We have received a tax acknowledgement ID from IRAS and also an acknowledgement. So this is all a great sign. And this, for all practical purposes, this invoice, which is a PEPAL sales invoice, has been sent to the customer through the InvoiceNow network and also sent to GST IRAS for GST reporting through the InvoiceNow network. Now, let's look at our second sales invoice, which was just a company. Okay, let's look at the e-delivery status, and maybe we can just click on the InvoiceNow sync button. And again, you can see that the tax status is submitted. We have received an acknowledgement ID from IRAS, and basically it is a successful submission. What we now want to do is to look at a third case, okay, which is basically a non-PEPAL purchase invoice, okay? Again, let's say this is now, we are purchasing some things, and let's use our company, just a company, which is GST registered, but it is not on PEPAL. So in this case, we are buying oranges from them, and let's say 200 pieces at $4 each at a standard rate of 9%. When the invoices you, they will use standard rate of 9%. But when this is captured as a purchase invoice, the tax codes must comply. So typically, the sales tax code will map to the purchase tax code, something like this, right? The standard rate of 9% will map to the TX of 9%. The zero rated will map to the zero rated purchase, and the out of scope will map to the out of scope purchase. So now we need to go to vendors, bills, right? Same thing, let's go ahead and create. In this case, let us choose the vendor as just a company, okay? So just a company, and what we want to do is basically capture the details. So we said oranges, 200 quantity at $4. As you can see, the system automatically proposes a standard rate of TX, tax code of TX, right? So let's go ahead and validate this invoice, okay? As this invoice gets validated, same thing, all the default fields are essentially being populated. Take note, the tax status is blank as of now, and the system is already transmitting this purchase invoice in the background. So if you now go to the e-delivery tab, okay, we can just click on the InvoiceNow sync button again to see what is the status. Again, you can see that the e-invoice was generated, the tax status is now changed to submitted, and you have received a tax acknowledgement ID from IRAS. So essentially, we have covered three flows. Now, an added feature we have is basically, because we are an access point, we also give you a dashboard. So if you log into the dashboard, you can essentially monitor your transactions here. So on the left, there is a PEPAL inbox for your B2B transactions, a PEPAL outbox, and there's also IRAS transactions. So if you click on the IRAS transactions and you scroll down, we should be able to see our latest invoices, right? So if you recall, the latest one was bill 2026005, and you can see that is the same thing here, and it has received a successful status of submission, and basically the acknowledgement ID, which you see here, is also being captured in the system, right? Okay, basically that's how easy it is to use the InvoiceNow-Ready solution.